Israel has made the decision to reoccupy the Gaza Strip with increased military operations set to begin in the coming days. So here's what we know so far, as well as some reactions from those in favor and those opposed to this most recent decision. Now, according to some reporting in Axios by Barak Ravid, he says Israel's security cabinet last night approved Prime Minister Netanyahu's proposal for the occupation of Gaza City. He said the decision came after more than 10 hours of consultations. It's the first phase of an offensive that could include the occupation of the entirety of the Gaza Strip by Israeli defense forces. He says President Trump has decided not to intervene and let the Israeli government make its own decisions. That's according to U.S. officials. And the IDF was expected to issue evacuation orders ahead of the new offensive to around 1 million Palestinians who are located in Gaza City and its immediate surroundings. Now, we have an official statement here from Netanyahu's office where they talk about the goal of this next phase of the operation. He says the political security cabinet approved the prime minister's proposal to defeat Hamas. The IDF will prepare to take control of the city of Gaza while providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population outside the combat zones. The cabinet adopted the majority vote of 5 principles to end the war. 5 key aspects here. 1, disarm Hamas. 2, return all hostages, both living and the fallen. 3, demilitarize the Gaza Strip. 4, Israeli security control over the Gaza Strip. And 5, the existence of an alternative civilian government that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. They add that an overwhelming majority of cabinet ministers believe that the alternative plan presented in the cabinet would not achieve the defeat of Hamas nor the return of the hostages. And understandably so, some of the pushback here is this sounds an awful lot like what Israel has been attempting now for a couple years. And in the back half of today's video, we're going to get into an assessment from Manny Fabian at the Times of Israel talking about how just within recent days, the assessment was made that the main objectives of this most recent operation, named Gideon's Chariots, were unfulfilled. Now, turning to a couple clips here to highlight some of this process. We first have one from Prime Minister Netanyahu during an interview with Fox News yesterday, where he laid out a couple things that I think are worth noting. First off, this exact plan as what they're going to do in the Gaza Strip, but also kind of pointing to the fact that the United States is by and large just standing by. This is Israel's decision. We're essentially letting them do whatever they see fit. Here we go.
Has President Trump given the green light for your plan to take over the remaining 25% of Gaza and occupy all of it?
Well, you know, he understands that it's Israel who's going to do the fighting. It's not American soldiers.
Did he give you a yes?
Well, he just says, I know Israel will do what it has to do, and we haven't got into that kind of discussion. But we have gotten into a discussion on 2 things. One, the humanitarian surge that we're going to do, which will precede our final military action, because I want the population to be in safe zones, to have food, water, sewage, electricity, medical help. I want to free 2 million Gazans from Hamas terrorism. The second thing that we agree on is that the day after has to have certain principles. I'm not talking about a detailed plan yet because I think that'll be developed. But the 5 principles, the key principles are these. 1, Hamas has to lay down its arms. 2, Gaza has to be demilitarized. 3, all the hostages have to be released. And 4, Israel will be responsible for overall security. So if there's an attempt to have a resurgent Hamas or resurgent terrorism, you know, we're the ones who are going to take care of it. And 5, let Gaza be governed by a civilian authority that is not Israel, because I don't want to occupy Gaza forever. I don't want to govern Gaza. I want to have a different governance there that basically is willing to live in peace with Israel and give Gazans a different future. That's entirely different from these unbelievable lies that are leveled against us, frankly against me too, by the international press that doesn't care to check the facts. It just takes Hamas statistics, Hamas arguments. It just swallows them hook, line, and sinker, and delivers this vilification of the one democracy, the one Jewish state that is fighting people massacred. It's the equivalent of the massacre of thousands and thousands of Americans the rocketing of American cities, nobody would stand for that.
Come back to my
So pretty much what you would expect there from Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I haven't seen much from President Trump, but Secretary of State Marco Rubio did also do an interview yesterday where he was asked about this and if the United States is on board with what Israel is getting ready to do. And I think the best takeaway here is we are pretty much in lockstep. Whatever Israel wants, that's what we're going to be on board with. Here's Secretary Rubio.
Lots of talk coming out of the Middle East. The government of Israel might engage in a military takeover of all of Gaza, the remaining parts of Gaza they don't already control. Have you spoken to the Prime Minister, and do you think that is a wise decision for Israel to take over Gaza altogether?
Well, ultimately, the president has said that it's up to Israel to decide what they need to do for their own security. I've spoken often, almost daily, to somebody in the Israeli government, often to the prime minister, but many times to many members of his team. Here's what I would say. There are three problems going on there, and they're all interrelated. The first is there is a humanitarian problem that needs to be addressed. We're working very hard to figure out ways to address it in ways that doesn't benefit Hamas, but that allows people to be fed and prevents a further humanitarian problem there that we're seeing now. The second is that there are 20 innocent human beings that are being held hostage in horrifying conditions. And the third is that as long as Hamas exists, there will not be peace. There cannot be a permanent peace. It'll restart again if Hamas remains. There's a lot of attention being paid to the humanitarian, and we want to do everything we can to be helpful on the humanitarian problem. But not enough attention being paid to the fact that 20 people that had nothing to do with this are being held hostage in tunnels on the verge of death, and no real talk about how Hamas needs to be disarmed and disbanded. We have to focus more on those two things. You have to do all three. And all the talk is about humanitarian, which is important. We are willing to do a lot to be helpful there, but we have to focus on the other two. Those other two cannot be forgotten. And the president has said he wants all the hostages out, not 5, not 7, all of them, including the deceased hostages. And ultimately, Hamas cannot continue to exist. Even the Arab League says it. As long as Hamas exists as an armed group in Gaza, there will not be a peace. There will not be a peaceful future because it's going to happen again. And this can never happen again.
Now, I don't think that should be all that surprising, all of this, to be honest. The idea that Israel is going to push further in military operations shouldn't come as a shock. Anybody who's been following this conflict knows that the two sides are kind of stuck in their demands. Hamas refuses to lay down their arms. Hamas will not release the hostages without Israel fully leaving the Gaza Strip and allowing Hamas to stay in power. Those are incompatible goals, and they have been for a long time. Nothing's changed there. So it was kind of expected that if no movement was made, Israel would probably increase military pressure, and that is what we appear to see playing out right now. Also, shouldn't be much of a shock that the United States is just fully on board with whatever Israel wants to do here. The indications have been there for at least a few months. When President Trump was coming into office, many people were saying this is the most pro-Israel government in American history. So, as you would expect of the most pro-Israel government in American history, if that really is the case, full support of Israel's war plans here. Now, there is plenty of pushback, and we're getting into that, starting with Senator Chris Van Hollen of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, also being interviewed yesterday. Not really a fan of how this is playing out, to put it lightly. Here we go.
Well, Ali, you're right. This would be a complete blank check to Prime Minister Netanyahu and the most extreme right-wing elements in his government, people like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. As you indicated at the beginning, this idea of reoccupying Gaza is opposed by the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF. It's opposed by the hostage families. It's supported by the most far-right elements that want Israel to essentially take over Gaza and ultimately also take over the West Bank. And what Donald Trump is doing is not only providing a blank check, but he's making America complicit in this effort. He says he wants to feed starving people. I wish he would start doing something about it, like telling the Netanyahu government to allow the UN distribution system to begin again.
So definitely some pushback here in the United States. When I say the U.S. is in lockstep, what I mean is our decision makers. So yes, Senator Van Hollen pushing back here, saying he doesn't think this is a good idea. He's in the minority right now, and his party does not have the White House. So they're able to speak up. They're able to say things. They're not really able to follow through with any sort of action right now if they wanted to. But inside of Israel, there's also some pushback. Former Prime Minister and opposition leader Yair Lapid said, quote, The cabinet decision last night is a disaster that will lead to many more disasters, in complete contradiction to the opinion of the army and security ranks without considering the wear and exhaustion of the fighting forces. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich dragged Netanyahu into a move that will take many months, lead to the death of the hostages, the killing of many soldiers, cost the Israeli taxpayer tens of billions, and result in diplomatic collapse. This is exactly what Hamas wanted, for Israel to be stuck in the field without a goal, without defining the picture of the day after, in a useless conquest that no one understands where it leads. History and your common sense will judge who is right. And it's not just the opposition party in Israel pushing back on this. As expected, a large number in the international community is also not very much in favor of this most recent Israel move. The UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said, quote, "The Israeli government's plan for a complete military takeover of the occupied Gaza Strip must be immediately halted. It runs contrary to the ruling of the International Court of Justice that Israel must bring its occupation to an end as soon as possible, to the realization of the agreed two-state solution, and to the right of Palestinians to self-determination." UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer added to this, saying, quote, "The Israeli government's decision to further escalate its offensive in Gaza is wrong, and we urge it to reconsider immediately. This action will do nothing to bring an end to this conflict or help secure the release of the hostages. It will only bring more bloodshed." And then we do have some statements here, short ones, from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. As you could imagine, they are opposed to this as well. Hamas says, quote, "This is a new war crime. The semantic shift between the terms occupation and taking control was made in an attempt to evade international law, but it proves that this is a violation of the Geneva Convention." And Palestinian Islamic Jihad said, quote, "This is a new chapter in the war of genocide against Gaza." So there we have the decision that Israel is going to resume military operations. A big question now is, what exactly does this look like? Because we haven't exactly seen major changes for quite a while now. Operation Gideon's Chariots, that we're going to get into here in just a moment, was the most recent offensive operation, but it also kind of had some promised goals that went unfulfilled. And that's according to Manny Fabian here in the Times of Israel, where he writes, quote, "The main objectives of Gideon's Chariots were the defeat of Hamas in Gaza and the release of all of the hostages." We reported on that at the time when this new operation kicked off. The ceasefire talks fell through, and Israel kind of said, enough's enough. We're going to go in. We're going to resolve this thing with military force. And at the time, the question was, what is going to be so different this time around? And it seemed like maybe they were going to be moving into some new areas, and they did, and maintained a presence in areas that they previously moved through and just conducted clearance operations. But that didn't really do much in terms of the elimination of Hamas, and it certainly didn't bring the hostages home. He says none of these goals and objectives have been achieved. While political leaders initially said the offensive would see the IDF conquer the Strip, it was later clarified that the military would take control of around 75% of the territory, which is where things currently stand. The IDF did not plan to advance further in Gaza, as Hamas had threatened to execute hostages if troops are seen approaching the areas where they are held. They say the IDF has focused its operations in areas where it was able to determine that no hostages were located. However, for over a month, those operations have mostly consisted of razing buildings, Hamas tunnels, and other infrastructure used by the terror group, with little direct fighting taking place. So that was the change, is we definitely saw Israel move into some new areas, but according to this reporting, they were deliberately going into areas where there weren't hostages located, so they didn't risk Hamas executing those hostages when they moved in. We've definitely seen, based off the footage, an increase in the destruction of infrastructure, the destruction of tunnels, and the targeting of Hamas personnel via airstrikes and troops on the ground. And Fabian continues here by saying, despite the Israeli military pressure in seizing most of Gaza, the hostage ceasefire talks with Hamas have stalled. And that leads us to today, or last night, with this marathon 8 to 10 hour session where the decision was made to continue or increase military operations in the Gaza Strip. Now, one part of this, the reporting was just starting to come out, is that Germany may be stopping arms sales to Israel until Israel stops or maybe doesn't pursue this next military operation. Not entirely clear what that looks like at this point. Also, I'm not clear how much Israeli military equipment and their capabilities rely on Germany versus, say, the United States. But either way, this is generally where things sit right now. Expect an increase in military operations sometime in the next couple days, certainly within the next week or two. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.